Let's take a seat and unwind as we look at this week's most amusing tales. Welcome to our weekly roundup. This is the best place to look back at the stories for this week. Have pleasure viewing this collection, whether you're on vacation or hanging out with pals. Share the timestamp of your favorite tales with everyone. Let's begin with the video. What's the most desperate thing you've ever done for money? Story 1. I participated in a food study where I couldn't eat for a day before, arrived at the lab crazy early in the morning, had a tube put down my throat, and lay there for 6 hours as they pumped liquids into and out of my stomach. After the first 2 hours, I begged them to at least turn on the TV, but they would only let me watch PBS so I couldn't accidentally see any commercials about food. It wasn't fun, but the pay was decent, and they served me a steak dinner afterward. I sold my body to a substance study for 3 weeks in 1991. We took a dose of some antibiotic every day and had blood drawn throughout the day. Every day. Pay was $2,000, which was sweet for 1991. Being in the substance testing facility for 3 weeks was interesting. I participated in clinical studies, just ones that let me go home. Just finished my second one. Kind of weird to get laid for free health info and to take stuff that can potentially help or harm me. But overall, I have had a positive experience, and hopefully this leads to helping more people. Wait, you typed this, I think, as kind of weird getting laid for free health info rather than paid? I absolutely did. That would have been an entirely different experience for a clinical trial. It confused the smeg out of me. I thought you were awkwardly bragging about getting some at the trials. I got paid $1,000 to drink screwdrivers and be flashed by bright lights. Basically, got paid to get drunk with a bunch of sensors hooked up to me. That's pretty interesting. What were they studying exactly? This was almost 40 years ago at the Mayo Clinic. Honestly, I don't even think I even asked what the study was. If I remember right, they paid $120. How much torture a hungry person would take for food? While most participants ended the procedure within a range of 15 seconds to 125 seconds due to extreme discomfort, one outlier tolerated over 21,000 seconds. Our hypothesis is that this must have resulted from an abnormal pain tolerance, as the financial incentive was intentionally low, equaling less than minimum wage for the participant. I've done 53 substance studies. The tube down my throat one was the worst, incredibly painful, only paid $2,000, and they banned me from the site for giving accurate feedback that it was incredibly painful. Frack Abvi and Wukagan. I mean, I did a bunch of studies there before that went fine, but I'm still ticked. Edit. This is getting some traction, so I'll elaborate on my beef with AbbVie. One of the purposes of doing substance studies is for the subjects to report if they have any adverse effects. But if you do report your adverse effects, you're at risk of being blacklisted for future studies. So savvier subjects than me don't report them, so the study fails to accomplish what it's supposed to. They're juking the stats they report to the FDA. Oh, man. So how is it possible to peer review studies like this, to have someone look at the data? I think that would involve having to bring people back and interviewing them about their experiences. And that's a weird way. That's a really sneaky way to try and get the stats going in your direction. Story 2. Participated in a sleep study where they had us wired up to electrodes to monitor our responses at periodic intervals across 3 days without sleep. It was brutal. I learned I cannot go without sleep for 2 days in a row. Holy cow, thank you for all the likes. You got me. I'm curious. What happens after the 2-day mark? What kind of symptoms did you have? I made it through the first night without sleep okay, but that second night was so hard because we had to make through the whole day without the opportunity to leave the dorm, which was a big room with tables and games and books and things, and we were each assigned a bedroom, which was like torture because you were not allowed to sleep. Periodically, we would go to our rooms, connect to our monitoring devices, then we would get questions over a headset and would have to press buttons to indicate our responses. I just got slower and slower at each interval, and because they would pause their questions and you had to wait to provide your answers, I started losing the ability to respond. Like, I could hear them talking, but I could not get my body to take action. I think it's called dissociation. I made it to maybe 5 a.m., and I knew I was not going to make it through the next testing time, so I took my money, about $1,200, and left. I can't speak for the original person, but when I went 4 days without sleep, really bad anxiety, normally a heavy weed smoker, but I was in a foreign country, so it wasn't really an option. I got insanely hungry and felt off. I can't quite describe it, but everything just feels wrong. I also started having hallucinations after the second day, mostly just seeing shadows move out of the corner of my eye or lights flickering. Some auditory hallucinations like people walking around when no one's there. Pretty scary, and I wouldn't recommend it. At least that guy got paid. During my senior year of high school, I had a 4-day period where I could not physically sleep due to a reaction with medication, which was still forced to go to school during the 3rd day, till they realized how messed up I was when I started hallucinating the paint on the walls leaking and dripping. Once in high school, I was awake for 3 days straight. I also started hallucinating. That's when I knew, whether I felt tired or not, it was time for bed. I remember staying awake for almost 3 days straight. Towards the end, I remember learning I had the power to snap my fingers to turn the TV on and off. Well, I woke up on the floor watching TV and just kept trying what I'd been doing over and over, and it just stopped working. That's when I realized I had just passed out while watching TV, had a very vivid dream, and I was super bummed out for the next 30 minutes. Ex-military here, and yeah, after 2-ish days, you will begin to hallucinate. It's fracking wild. Longest I've done is 3 days, and by the end of that, I was more than out of it than if I drank a whole carton of beers. The weird thing is, you reach a point where you don't even feel tired anymore. I don't know how it works, but it does. I read somewhere that it's believed you stop feeling tired because your body is thinking, if I haven't slept yet, something must be hunting me, and if I sleep, I'll expire. Not sure I believe that specific reasoning, but a vague, if I haven't slept yet, there must be a good reason to still be awake, so let's turn off the sleepy setting. Sounds plausible enough to me. Melatonin probably just drops because the brain is like, frack it, you're not getting the clue. Brain is probably like, unaliving must be hunting you very hard lately, or you wouldn't be doing this. I'll ease up. I don't think I have that. I think my body just says, yeah, you're going to sleep. I have never been able to stay up more than 24 hours. I've also had a sleep study done before to diagnose a sleep disorder I have. And I had all those wires and everything, sensors stuck to me while I slept. It was really hard to sleep. Story 3. I have lots of memories of dumpster diving for presents during the holiday season. At work recently, in an effort to make remote work more bearable, my team asked a question about what is a holiday memory that is most distinct in your mind. So many people had these wonderful memories of playing in the snow or cooking something with their family or going on vacation to this place or that place. So many people had these descriptions of middle-class life because I'm in a white-collar profession that is dominated almost exclusively by middle-class white women. I didn't feel comfortable sharing my experience of digging through dumpsters for toys for my siblings and my parents as a holiday memory. I couldn't share that the most memorable thing that comes to mind when I think of the holidays is when my family procured a Costco-sized package of breath mints. And we ate those nonstop for 4 weeks until I got an unbearable stomachache. And what I remember most about that is that I can't eat breath mints anymore because the smell of them makes me sick. But that's not the type of memory one can share with their coworkers, if they are middle-class white women and expect to walk out of that transaction the same person. So I don't share that part of myself with people that I spend a good amount of my day with. It's all a long-winded way of saying, thank you for sharing this part of you with strangers on the internet. It feels good to not feel alone. I hope you know that you're not alone. I feel you. Grew up in an area that was all middle, upper-class families. Mine, on the other hand, struggled for years, financially and mentally, mostly while I was in elementary school. I learned from a young age to not talk about holidays because while other kids went skiing on vacation and opened the newest toys on Christmas morning, my mom was having manic depressive episodes and we were struggling to buy enough groceries. I used to secretly flip through the Toys R Us mailed catalog and circle things, pretending my life was so different. It really helped that my best friends knew my secrets, and I ended up marrying an incredibly emotionally mature man who went through something similar. You aren't alone. Now that is rough. The closest I've ever been to in that is buying from thrift stores. Maybe finding something useful in a very clean bin of giveaway trash or something like that. That's awful. I'm glad this person survived what they were going through. What is the stupidest reason you went to the hospital? Story 1. Broke my hip. Getting up from the couch. It was already really fracked up thanks to a medication I'd been on for years and hurt like a mongrel. When it finally snapped, I didn't think, Smeg, my hip broke. I thought, Smeg, this thing's acting up. Turns out the bone was necrotic and released a massive infection into my system. I woke up from a medically induced coma a month later with no idea how I wound up in the hospital. Edit. Wow, woke up from a nap to see a ton of replies and upvotes. Thanks, everyone. Edit 2. Just started replying to everyone's questions, but the gist is this. 1. Prednisone, a steroid used for rheumatoid arthritis, is what ruined my hip. I had a doctor who claimed it was safer than the pain meds I was on at the time. I really disagree with him after all that. 2. My dad was the one who called the ambulance a few days after it happened, since I passed out from exhaustion. Only place I felt remotely comfortable was my PC chair, and was stuck there for a whole night. He moved me to the living room couch where I finally got some sleep and spiked a fever. 3. Doing so much better now. I got my hip and a few other joints replaced over the next couple years. I'm still in pain from my rheumatoid arthritis, but it's a million times more manageable than it was before. Plus, I have much more competent doctors who are willing to listen to my concerns instead of the guy who put me on prednisone and said, "Which one of us has the medical degree?" Yeah, I thought so. Do what I say. In fact, my current pain management doctor told me to stay away from steroids like prednisone completely. They also ruined my bone density, among a couple other problems we're hoping to fix or at least manage. He's awesome. The total opposite of the guy who put me on prednisone. Thanks, everyone, for the replies and upvotes. I, too, broke a bone getting up. Broke my fibula getting up from the sand on a beach. Turns out I had a chunk of bone just missing from my leg. 3 weeks ago, I was walking my dog. She pulled on the leash and caused me to slip on some wet grass on a little hill we were on. I slipped and then fell. I heard a loud snap and instantly felt nauseated. I broke my right fibula in multiple places and had an avulsion fracture in my right tibia. There were also bone fragments that they weren't sure where they came from. I also ruined a ligament which left my ankle bones too far apart and my ankle totally unstable. I had surgery to put a good-sized plate and 7 screws in my fibula to put it back together. They cleaned out bone fragments. They also drilled straight through my ankle and put wire through there and then an artificial ligament. I have been non-weight-bearing on my right foot for 3 weeks and have at least 4 more weeks to go. Just this past Monday, I got my splint and cast and my stitches removed. Now I'm in a cam boot for who knows how long. I can't drive and am not cleared to work. Maybe in 4 weeks? all because I slipped while walking my dog. Oh, I feel for everyone. I have been very fortunate myself. I only somewhat fractured a wrist on a bike accident. I don't know if you can see the scar of the surgery scar. That's all I have managed to break over my lifetime. I'm grateful for the constitution I have, and I feel really sorry for these people and hope they get as better as they can soon. Story 2. I've always wondered what would happen if we stopped pooping. Thank you for trying it out so we don't have to. Science, thank you. No joke, but my ex's aunt literally expired from some sort of intestinal blockage. If the waste doesn't have anywhere to go, it can present as it did with original person here, or can actually poison your blood and unalive you that way. It sounds pretty painful either way. Sorry in advance, this is going to be too much information and gross. I've had a great aunt pass away from this too. They never could go to the bathroom and hated going to the doctor, so never went to find out what the problem was. Ended up passing away from complications due to the blockage. When they autopsied her, they found 40 pounds of excrement so lodged and backed up it was extremely hardened. Story always terrorized me as a child. Helped me learn it's not good to hold it in, though. Queen Caroline, wife of George II, King of Great Britain, was one of the smartest women ever to run a country through her husband. In 1737, her hernia had a small section of her small intestine poke through it. The quote-unquote doctors decided the best course of action was to cut that piece of her small intestine off without anesthesia. This, of course, did not end well. She perished in agony 11 days after her pain started. She told her husband to marry again. "No," he sobbed. "I will have mistresses." She replied, "Oh, my deity, that doesn't prevent it." He had had mistresses throughout their marriage and wrote to her telling her about them. He never remarried. My son had cerebral palsy and cannot walk independently, and that's not good for the digestive tract. So we have to be very conscious of his fluid and fiber intake, as well as his bodily output. He has indeed been so backed up in the past, before I knew how to keep him regular, that he couldn't keep food down and his vomit smells like feces. I took him to the ER once over his lack of BMs. They did x-rays and gave him the diagnosis of FOS, full of poop. Prescribed some quick-working but safe laxatives, and the next few days, I spent cleaning up a literal poop fest. I never used more bleach in my life. Still better than a ruptured colon. Edit. Thank you for the award and all your kind words. Mom hugs you all. Oh, man, that is really awful. I can't believe being so backed up, but it kind of reminds me of that South Park episode where Cartman tried to prove to everybody that you could process food the other way by sticking food up there and then pooping out your mouth. It's kind of gross, but I know this is more serious than that. Story 3. My mother perished from this, literally. She had issues for over a year stemming from poor diet and lack of exercise, which she refused to change. Instead, she embarked on a series of ping-pong adventures back and forth between multiple anti-diarrhea medications and medications to make you poop. Reason was she would get constipated, she would take a bunch of stuff that would work eventually, plus her own body reacting, and she would have diarrhea to clean itself out. Instead of riding that out for a day or two, she would take a bunch of stuff to stop it. Wash, rinse, repeat. Over and over again. It wreaked havoc on her digestive system, but I could not get her to change, stop, or go to a doctor. Eventually, she started having unrelated problems. She was put on some pain meds and was told that they could make her constipated. She said this, plus I told her, knowing her history. She did not tell the doctor who gave it to her about her digestive issues. Within a few days, she was in the hospital. I went in and was shocked because she now looked she was about 7 months pregnant. Her belly was so big. I was her medical POA, so the doctors took me aside. She had bladder cancer, a pretty big mass, but they did multiple scans and it was not touching or blocking her intestines or colon. They started asking questions because she wouldn't answer them, and she was blocked with poo all the way back up to her stomach. After all the review, it appears she never got cleaned out, so to speak, and only a little had been getting out for over a year. The meds kind of put the icing on the cake, so to speak. She was refusing an enema. Everyone in the hospital tried. I tried, but she wouldn't do it. Wouldn't give a reason. Just said no. By the way, she had had one or two in the past. She didn't have a fear of doctors or any religious reason. I have no idea why she refused. Within another day or two, an enema was no longer possible, and she was having trouble breathing. She finally consented, but an enema wouldn't have done anything at that point. They discussed doing an actual scope entering from the mouth and going down to get what they could from that end, and then another from the other end. Except then, general surgery was arguing oncology should do it since she was now technically a cancer patient, and oncology said the general needed to do it because it had nothing to do with her cancer. They fought over this for 2 days, and her actual ward doctor was preparing me, saying it most likely wouldn't work. He had never seen someone this bad. Along with her many meds she was now on, she digressed awfully fast. She stopped breathing. This particular hospital was known for not doing stuff for you after a certain age. They just kept you alive and reasonably comfortable, but this is the one she chose. Also, she was very insistent that if she ever had cancer, she didn't want to know. Completely serious. Long story on that one. So this may have been better anyway, because they dosed her up at the end and she passed peacefully and quickly rather than go through hospice for the next 6 months. They said that she had left. She still didn't know she had cancer when she passed. I know a guy who knows a guy who was a bit of a junkie. He didn't say anything for a few weeks and ended up vomiting feces. Be thankful you didn't wake up with logs coming up from your throat. Ugh. Another really tragic one to just get so backed up like that. And again, the last 2 stories are kind of referencing a main story that I don't think we've seen yet, and I'm hoping we get to it later on. But, geez, I just cannot believe that with your own health you would want to keep yourself so in the dark. I know people have their reasons, so, if you have a reason, let me know about it. What is something you have a hard time not judging people about? Story 1. I hate people that feel the need to constantly bring others down and make them feel bad about the things they enjoy. It's so sad to watch someone's enthusiasm about their hobby deflate because another person decided to be a tool about it. Working with kids, it's something I try to nip in the bud. Unfortunately, there's way too many adults doing that to kids. My cousin's dreams were crushed as kids by the adults in my family. Talents went to waste because of that. Even as a child myself, I knew it was wrong. Man, I think of myself as a relatively tough person who generally doesn't give a care what people think of me, but I'm 38 and overweight and realized I wanted to try rollerblading again. This was about 8 months after having my 3rd child. This one toolhead neighbor was out in his yard and made fun of me to my face as I skated up the road. Legit first time rollerblading in like 20 years, and I haven't put them back on since. I've even said, "Hey, don't give me a hard time. I haven't done this in years." And he rolled his eyes and said, "Yeah, I can tell." He made me feel so small and stupid. I'm mad at myself for not being tougher than the idiot's stupid comments. Edit. To all of you sub-commenters, you're a lovely group of people, and thank you so much for the encouragement. Yeah, curse that guy. When I get the guts up to go try again, I'll probably wait a few weeks till it's not hotter than the devil's taint outside. I will think of y'all. Sorry about that. And also, curse your sour baby neighbor. What a douchebag. It's hard to guard yourself against smeggy comments, though. I'm almost 33, and I consider myself to be pretty confident, but I can still get down sometimes. I love collecting vintage dresses in a really specific style, and recently I found one in a super rare color, so I was excited to tell my flatmate about it. But he just sighed and said, "Lame, nobody cares about this." Felt really small straight away. I hope you can manage to put on the roller skates back. It seems like a great way to enjoy freedom once you've got it down again. I know a lot of people enjoy skateboarding for the same reason, just randomly riding around and enjoying the surroundings. Really hope you can enjoy that again. As far as hobbies, there's this comedian, Jackie Cation, that has a really great podcast called The Dork Forest, where it's kind of the opposite of this. She just talks to someone and lets them talk about something they really enjoy. Not just geek stuff like comics and games, but things like salsa dancing or, just whatever the person's really passionate about. It's really a cool listen. Story 2. This is huge. Dictating what's acceptable through mocking and shaming others is unfortunately very effective, particularly with young people, and very common. Think of how much better the world would be if all those unique individuals were freely themselves. I had this experience with my love of horses. I will fully admit to being the horse girl of my school, but I didn't care because it was a small town and I lived on an acreage. Fast forward to me going to college in a big town in another state and opening myself up to more people, and I couldn't believe the hate that horse girls got. Like, my horse was my safe space, and I got natural exercise by just doing chores. So I started to change who I was. And I hate it because I just want to be the horse girl again. I want to wear jeans and plaid and a cowboy hat and boots. Luckily, I found an equine-assisted therapy place to volunteer at to give me my horse fix, but it's still not enough. I wish I had had the confidence to not care about what others thought of me and my interests. Oh, please go and do more horse girl stuff. If it makes you happy, that's what matters. I am a crazy cat lady. My sister is a horse girl. We do our own thing because we love animals. The stress-lowering factor of being around the horses again was so amazing for me to see with my sis. She's 50 now, and I think that proves you're never too old to go back. I hope you got some opportunities. Don't worry about what others think. The ones that matter will understand, and those that may judge definitely do not matter at all. And again, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people end up doing. It's just easy to compartmentalize somebody and just point to them as an other so someone else feels safe in their own choices. And that's just really closed-minded. Story 3. People who act tough. I can't take them seriously. Oh yeah? You can't take them seriously, huh? Want to say that to my face, Chief? I'll never forget this one night. I was on the second floor of a double-decker bus. I was heading home after working late on Saturday night. A lot of people were drunk. This one dude walks up to me in the aisle and just stares at me. I notice, pull my headphones out, put down my book, and say, "Can I help you?" With my most, "What the hell is your problem?" face. Buddy is there just to mug me. He says, "I bet I could kick your butt. You want to fracking go?" And he gives me a smack in the head. I've got miles of patience, so I just grit my teeth, adjust my glasses, and say, "No, I think I'd rather not." My book was on the seat next to me. The headphones were not around my neck. I was ready to go if this turned bad. Then this other wild dude down the aisle is like, "I do," and just runs full fracking tilt down the bus and 2-foot drop kicks this butthole in the chest. Player 2 has entered the game. It was fracking awesome. These two brawled all down through the bus like it was those clouds of scuffles in cartoons. They both went past the tea kettle, falling down the stairs, and eventually out the door of the bus once it had stopped. The bus just promptly drove away. I looked back and player number 2 noticed the bus was gone, punched this guy one time, knocked him clear out, and he just walked away like it was time to go home after work. Fracking legend. That is amazing. So people who act tough, yeah, I mean, that's great. Like, you never realize that the person that you are challenging might not be the one that accepts your challenge. That's just so amazing that his challenge got answered so swiftly like that. I love it. You love to see it. Story 4. I see this all the time at karaoke. If they don't like singing, but they still came to hang out with you anyway, that is not appropriate to pressure them into signing up for a song. Don't punish them for being supportive of your choice of a hangout spot. If you do, they'll likely never come back to a karaoke bar again. And that's just not right. Karaoke should be a fun environment, not one that causes someone anxiety because unaware buttholes keep approaching them asking, "Are you gonna sing?" I hate dancing. Always have since I was a kid. Apparently, there is no limit on how abusive people are allowed to be when forcing you to dance because it's so fun. It's annoying, too, when it's something you enjoy doing. Like, I play instruments and always have most of my life. Doesn't mean I'm inclined to play you a song just because you asked politely. And when you say no, people catch an attitude as if they paid you for a performance. Story 5. Not cleaning up after their dog. Just get a doggy bag, people. Well, I'd like to take it a step further. Some people actually clean up after their dog, put it in a bag, then toss that bag in the bushes and trees. Trimmed some trees at the edge of our property along the road and found several doggy poop bags. Luckily, we put up a couple signs and it seems to have solved the problem. At least if they had left the poop alone, it would have eventually biodegraded, but they had to seal it up in plastic. My husband and I were vacationing in Colorado and were doing some hiking. On the way up the trail, we saw exactly this. Not even tossed off trail, but right in the trail. My husband said maybe they left it going up and planned to get it coming down. I made the comment that if it was still there on the way back, we'd pack it out. Several hours later, we were flying down trail and I didn't see the bag, but my husband did. So, knowing I would have, he kindly grabbed it up and loops it on the end of his walking stick. We're about 15 minutes further down the trail when he starts questioning, and a good 30 minutes when he becomes absolutely convinced this is not dog poop and is, in fact, human poop. Yes, dear readers, my loving and kind husband packed out someone's poop from an otherwise pristine mountain trail. People suck. Story 6. Poor treatment of pets. Buying a $3,500 puppy for their kid at Christmas and dumping the dog at the pound a few months later when they realize how challenging raising a cute puppy can be. I will judge you. Glances down at a purebred husky from the pound sitting on the couch snuggling with favorite toys. As the owner of 2 rescue huskies, seriously, if you don't want the responsibility of raising a baby, don't get the dog. I see that often. I volunteer at our local shelter, and it really makes me angry seeing the people come in and just surrender the dog because they couldn't be bothered to put in the time and dedication. Dogs aren't a damn appliance. They are a living, breathing being with feelings. There honestly should be a database that those people get added to that prevents them from ever having a dog in the future, if that's the reason why they're surrendering a dog, or any other animal. And I get that there are legitimate reasons for surrendering an animal. Owner passes away, and surviving family cannot properly care for it, loss of housing and job, etc. If you want to see something sadder than that, I've been to Thailand a few times. The dog population out there is just out of hand. There are a lot of homeless dogs just trying to beat the heat at the beach, just sitting in the ocean and just roaming around. If there's a 7-Eleven, and there are a lot of them in Thailand, there is a dog sitting there that's adopted that because they know people will give them leftover food and stuff. There are some people that try to make sure they get some good food and some good shots to make sure they're all right. But yeah, I mean, I can agree with this sentiment here that poor treatment of pets is just awful.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Parents, What is the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? Story 1. It's funny now, but wasn't at the time. One day I was called to pick up my daughter from school. I asked why and was vaguely told she had been caught cheating, was being disrespectful to the teacher, and had destroyed government property. Holy hell, I thought. What had she done? My mind instantly went through scenarios in which she had cheated on a test, got caught, then my sweet little 7-year-old had cursed the teacher while throwing something through a window. I got to the school, found my scared daughter in the principal's office looking totally dejected, and asked for an explanation. I discovered the cheating was she had giggled while playing a game where someone was it, and the other half of the classroom had to guess who it was. The disrespecting the teacher was from her crossing her arms when she was being told how she wrecked the game. The best was the explanation for destroying government property. During story time, she was picking at loose carpet threads. I was extremely angry with my daughter the whole drive from work, and after this load of what the hell, it instantly transferred to anger with the school. You called me here because she giggled, crossed her arms, and picked at an old nasty carpet? I was hot and took my daughter home, letting her know I was a bit upset with her, but let her know that there would be no more punishment. She'd been through enough. We went home and watched cartoons, and I made her favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup for lunch. Stuff like this is precisely why parents side with their kids so much. We all went through school. We know the most likely teachers to kick up a fuss are the ones who are the problem themselves. Do you think this was an overreaction? I think this was a massive overreaction. It's all of this stuff, it just makes it sound a lot more accusatory, and it sounds a lot more dangerous than what she actually did. I don't think she deserved all this being scared over all those simple things. Story 2. When I was in 7th grade, I was an office runner. Basically, if your reading and writing skills are above a certain level, they'd let you skip reading class and just work in the office, getting kids whose parents had come for them, delivering messages, that sort of thing. Anyway, the kid next to me just wouldn't shut the frack up. He kept rattling on and on and on, and I'd had enough of it. I had a monster fart brewing, so I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and farted on him. Or, at least, that was the plan. Instead, I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and completely pooped my pants in the most glorious fashion. This wasn't a little nugget. This was a full pants load of chocolate pudding that ran down my leg and made a little puddle on the floor. Everything in the office goes dead silent, and there's no mistaking what's just happened. The kid just stared at me with absolute horror in his eyes. Without looking away from him, I raised my hand and said, "Miss," office lady's name I don't remember, "I think I need to call my mom." I went home, took a bath, threw the pants away, and came back the next day. The kid was seated on the opposite side of the room from me, and I never had a problem with him again. He feared and respected me from then on. The ultimate power move. I think if that kid if was embarrassed and shied away from it, then yeah, he would have gotten teased for it. But the fact that he just owned it and kept staring at him was the part that made it the power move. Story 3. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a shirt that we had got as a hand-down from a friend of my mom's with Braille on the front. Apparently, no one ever took the time to figure out what it said, but there was a translator or key on the sleeve, so I sat down and translated the word on the front one letter at a time while in class. Let's see if spelling this out gets by. F-U-C-K-O-F-F. Oh my, I said. I knew this was a bad word, so I told my teacher and apologized. I wasn't in trouble, but my parents were called and asked to bring a new shirt while I waited in the office. My principal thought it was hilarious, apparently. We had a classmate who was partially blind. I'm unsure if she had vision enough to see my shirt, but she did know Braille. I believe that is one of the reasons I had to wait in the office, though. I'd like to imagine a 7-year-old saying that like an elderly woman saying something risque. I'm glad this is one where the context and everything, the reaction of it, was just very well tempered. It wasn't a big hullabaloo, didn't have to go home or anything like that. I think it's kind of good for the kid. The kid was curious. He decided to teach themselves how to translate Braille. I think it was positive overall. Story 4. Not me, but my sister. She got a call from her son's very Catholic school that he needed to be picked up. She gets to the school, and the principal says he had to go home for the day because he peed on the tree outside at recess. He really laid into her about how they had to bleach the tree. Seriously, they poured bleach on the tree because a little kid peed on it. And it was terrible, and how she shouldn't be teaching her son these things. My sister looked him straight in the eye and said, "Do you really think I have the right plumbing to have taught him that? Yell at my husband when he comes in next time. Bleaching trees has got to be one of the better things I've heard today." Story 5. My dad got sent to the principal's office for telling his 6th grade teacher she was pronouncing the state capital of South Dakota, Pierre, wrong. She kept saying Pierre, 2 syllables, like the French name, and he said it was Pierre, 1 syllable, like what you fish off of. He was sent off for not respecting a teacher's authority. My grandma had to drive to school to talk to the teacher and principal and said, "Did you ask why he says it's Pierre? Because if you did, you'd find out that both his father and I are from South Dakota. He visits his grandparents and aunts and uncles in South Dakota every summer. He knows plenty of people from South Dakota who all say Pierre. Do you know anyone from South Dakota? No? Well, take it from a South Dakotan. It's Pierre. We're not fancy French people. And stop wasting my time." Story 6. Unicorn Club. So my daughter was in 5th grade. She was proving to be pretty responsible, so she was allowed to have a cell phone, because she was home about an hour before I was on weekdays, and an Instagram account that I heavily monitored. We never had any issues. Still haven't, and she's now in high school. Well, I got a call from her school's principal one day. He tells me 2 boys were fist-fighting in the lunchroom. I asked what that had to do with my daughter. Well, apparently, my child had used an Instagram account to start what was essentially a cult called Unicorn Club. Unicorns were obviously the worshipped deity, with goats being the devil figure to the unicorn gods. These 2 boys got into a fist fight over whether unicorns or goats were better. I had to pick her up to prevent further disputes and disband Unicorn Club. Too long didn't read? My 10-year-old daughter created a small cult around unicorn worship. I can respect this. She should have made the cult about lambs instead. I don't think anyone's going to argue about lambs, and they obviously make for great video games. Story 7. Not me, but my coworker at the time. The school called her one day to come pick up her 5-year-old daughter for threatening to unalive the teacher. Her daughter had gotten in trouble for talking. When the teacher put her in timeout, she said, "If you put me in timeout, my daddy is going to come here and unalive you." Turns out my coworker lives on a farm where they butcher pigs. When it was time to butcher a pig, my dad would say, "Gotta go unalive a pig," which is where she picked it up. When they asked her what she thought that word meant, she said, "Unalive it. They go away and you get a new one." So, she thought she could get her daddy to come out and replace the teacher with a new teacher, and that was what the word unalive meant. That is cute. Story 8. I got a phone call earlier this year from the school nurse saying she was concerned because my son had passed out while in the lunch line. I went to pick him up and he seemed a little dazed, but okay. My kid couldn't remember anything about what happened beforehand, so I made an appointment with his pediatrician an hour later. Right as we were getting ready to leave, he sheepishly said, "Mom, I just remembered that right before I passed out, we were playing a game to see who could turn their face the reddest. So my kid had me thinking he had a brain tumor. But no, he just held his breath until he passed out. And not a single other kid thought they should mention that to the teacher. Thanks for the gold. What's the fastest you've ever gone from caring about someone to straight up loathing them? Story 1. At the time, had a little sister. She was graduating from college, and her college was not close by. It was a few states away and at least a 5-hour drive. We both loved the sister, but we weren't going to make it to her graduation. We couldn't afford a hotel for the weekend, and we couldn't take off from work to get there on time. She freaked out on us. It was the biggest tantrum I've seen an adult make. My girlfriend and I both assumed it wasn't that big of a deal, but seeing how much her sister freaked out, we reevaluated the situation. So we packed up quickly and drove through the night to get there. She told us we could sleep in her apartment that night, but that we need to get a hotel the following night. That was fine. We found something online for like $100 a night. We got to her place in record time. It was not even midnight. We felt like heroes for making up so quickly. We get to her apartment, and she won't let us in. She says she's already in bed, and we should have gotten there earlier if we wanted to take her up on her offer. So we're both exhausted, and we have nowhere to stay. I just wanted to turn around and go back home, but my girlfriend was a better person than me. Luckily, we had other friends in the city, and one was nice enough to give us their couches for the night. It's been like 15 years, and I assumed the sister was getting one last lay with a college hookup because I could not imagine any other scenario where she couldn't simply walk down 2 flights of stairs to open the door for us. I ended up marrying the girlfriend and still bring up this situation anytime she gets in a fight with her sister. It's usually, "I can't believe how selfish my sister is being." And I go, "You can't? Remember that time we drove to her college and she cuts me off. Of course, she also remembers it. When a college hookup is more important than your sister and her boyfriend who drove 5 hours to meet you. Ugh, that sounds like something straight out of a sitcom, really. Who expects that kind of behavior in real life? Thankfully, they didn't have to sleep in their car. I don't know what kind of temperature this city is or anything, but it definitely wouldn't have been the best thing. Story 2. I have a story that isn't of the cheating variety and made me lose any respect for 3 people at once. Late high school years. A friend in our group had invited everyone to hang out at his parents' house. We were supposed to agree on a time the day of, but people weren't answering my calls or messages or were really vague. It was almost 7 p.m., which was a couple of hours later than I'd figured, so I decided to drive over. Sent one guy a message saying no one's really answering, so I'll just go ring the friend's doorbell. So all of a sudden, the friend calls me and says he was caught up in something and the whole thing might be off. He'll let me know. Thing is, he called me when I was just parking in front of his house and had a clear view of almost everyone in my group in his house. I let the call go on for several minutes, watching him motion people to be quiet, doing the talking hand yada yada gesture, etc., without letting him know I was watching him, until the dude finally spotted my car. He then, very obviously, told everyone to hide because he thought I'd just pulled up, and one guy who also pretended to be my friend actually hit the ground together with his girlfriend to avoid being seen from the window. So those 3 people, 2 friends and the girlfriend of one I have absolutely zero respect for. Also, I have nothing to do with any of them anymore, so that's nice. Then again, I also very clearly saw one real friend tell the friend off. He also called me immediately and said to wait up. He'd rather hang out with me than those buttholes. 20 years later, we're still very close and effectively formed a new group of friends. So, big silver lining. I'm so glad your friend went with his gut and made the right decision to stick with you afterwards. I'd like to think I'd made that choice in your scenario. Sorry you had awful friends, mate. It's really good to have, well, in a way, I mean, it's bad that this situation happened, but to be able to have physical proof right there in front of you, it's a little heartbreaking, but at least you can make the decision to go on with your life. I'm glad this person decided that he'd rather spend time by himself than have to deal with fake friends, and good for that other person to stand up for him, too. Story 3. Had made some plans with the girlfriend at the time for Valentine's Day. This was back in late high school. I'd called her on the phone a few hours before to reconfirm details, and she abruptly begged off because supposedly her parents were going to be having a date of their own later that evening, and so she was being assigned to take care of her grandma for the day. Her grandmother needed constant care, so it wasn't unusual for one of her parents to be taking a day to stay with her. She was supposed to leave pretty early in the afternoon and be with her all evening. So I decided that the least I could do was maybe drop off some flowers and chocolates in a basket and stuff, and so she'd have something nice waiting when she got back. Spent a bunch of money on getting something nice, showed up at her place around 5, expecting just her parents to be there, and not only was she the one to answer the door, I could clearly hear both parents chatting away in the background, and there was no grandmother to be seen. Turned out, she just didn't have the guts to bite the bullet and properly break up with me. She was just going to keep canceling until I got the picture or something. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I had a girlfriend that pulled this kind of stunt. We had dated for a while and then spent about a month apart, but still dating. When we came back to living in the same area, she kept finding excuses to not hang out. We eventually broke up, but it was miserable until then. I know there's another side to this story. There are some people who, when the breakup has happened, the other person has gotten scary and violent. I don't know the background of this. If this person had no reason to believe the other person could become crazy or something, what do you think? Do you think it was fear of violence or just straight up cowardice? Let me know. Story 4. Had a really great friend in high school. He was cool, but he's always trying to sell stuff to people in the hallways, like video games or pocket knives or sunglasses. After over a year of being friends with him, he came over to my house to hang out, and when he left, a bunch of my favorite video games were missing. I realized what was happening, and I had plans on forgiving him if he just fessed up and apologized. Instead, he got super defensive and angry, and I instantly lost any respect I had for the guy. I let one of my friends borrow some PS4 games and a controller. The 3 games were $60 each, and the controller was $65. He only asked to borrow them for a few days, as he only had access to a PS4 for that time. A few weeks go by, and I've forgotten about the games. But when I did finally ask, he just never replied. 2 years later, one of our mutual friends informed me that he sold them for weed money. Story 5. I worked for my stepmom with the intent that I would take over the business when she retired in a few years. I took more than a 50% pay cut and left my career of 10 years of managing and leading organizations to come work for her. Those few years came and went with her unable to even talk about a timeline for retirement. I spent years trying to fix processes and procedures around the office to make her life easier and to make the general workflow easier for all employees, but she was completely resistant to any change from the status quo, while simultaneously always complaining about how busy she was and how we just didn't have any good processes in place. I finally confronted her about her retirement timeline and put it in writing that I would be her succession plan. She balked at even putting together a plan for her retirement. I let her know that I really couldn't hang around if there weren't any prospects for advancement or pay increases. My wife secured a job in a new town, and I gave my stepmom a 6-month notice that we would be moving. I explained that I would be more than willing to help hire and train my replacement and finish formalizing all the procedures I had developed in my time there. She fired me the next business day. Curse that shrew. Story 6. 1-year friendship with this girl. I invited her over to my new apartment. She came over and wanted to gossip about her coworkers. When she paused, I tried to add into the conversation, make a joke, give reassurance, add a comment, etc., but she would immediately raise her voice and start talking over me. I kept getting angrier every time it happened until I was actually loathing her internally. She was so self-absorbed that she didn't notice I went from smiling and engaged to frowning while staring off into space. After 2+ hours of not being allowed to talk, I made up an excuse to kick her out of the apartment and then vowed to never see her again. Sounds like one of my current friends. Only has time to talk about herself. Doesn't care for my opinions unless it somehow contains her. Only asks about my life after she's run out of things to complain about. I've had a long way to go in my life about stuff like this. I would always be someone that would have to talk about myself a lot just to make sure I was heard. I kind of felt like I was usually ignored, so when I had a chance to talk, I would just keep going. I think I still have a ways to go, but I think at least now I can listen a whole lot better. It's a continual process. People who have been on passed away people's computers. Did you find anything you wish you hadn't? Story 1. I sometimes help out at a charity that ensures paid spicy workers have access to condoms and can reach out to police if they suffer violence, etc. At one point, we threw a fundraiser that sold art created by former or occasionally current paid spicy workers and showcased the art of one passed-on woman in particular, who I believe was about to begin transitioning to a man. I was given her hard drive through a friend of the family that worked at the organization and asked to retrieve what I could of her art and her life. My memory is a little fuzzy on most of this, but I think her passing on happened in the early 2000s. She had a fairly large Napster directory, and I think it was a Windows XP machine. To be honest, I don't think I found anything I wish I hadn't. Instead, I found a trove of beautiful art and a small window into someone's life. She was both a hobbyist and a professional photographer who had a webcam she made good use of. I saw her travels to India and South America. I saw friends of all shapes and sizes, mainly muscular and heavily tattooed, and her action shots of her and her girlfriend. She had an active social life, and in most ways, she was just like the rest of us. I feel odd typing it, but I would have felt very voyeuristic if she were still alive. As it were, I didn't worry about it much, and instead thought of it as a very serious responsibility. I guess ultimately, I found a reminder that even people who do work that's derided or considered dehumanizing by some still lead normal and wonderful lives, just like the rest of us, with the same struggles and joys and trials and tribulations. I'm glad I got to experience it. It is interesting that we're living in this kind of age where we store more and more of our lives on our computer, and it seems like that's going to be the legacy we leave behind. And there's so much people can derive from that. And as long as people know the types of files that they need to access, it's going to be interesting how those survive in the future. Story 2. I guess I can somewhat contribute to this one. A couple of spring breaks ago, I found a nice little USB bracelet with the University of Hawaii logo on it in the middle of a sidewalk in Maui. I took it back home to the continental U.S., where it has sat on my mirror shelf for 2 years. During a period of procrastination, sometime probably a month ago, I plugged it in, just for the heck of it. It had all this Harry Potter music and some waltz music along with some college papers and other things. So for the next 2 hours, I listened to this person's music and just relaxed. I later decided to try and find out who it was. I opened a few more documents. One was a disability form from the university saying how his financial aid had been sent or something like that. I looked up his name on Google and found that he had passed away a month and a half after he dropped that USB for me to eventually find. Finding out that I had just listened to and thoroughly enjoyed the beautiful composition of a man who is no longer living, made me reflect on how intertwined our impact in this world is, as I bawled my eyes out and rocked myself back and forth. Needless to say, the paper that was due the next day was entirely forgotten. Again, this goes from the USB. It's a different situation from having a hard drive where people have their lives on it to a USB drive, which is probably more or less a snapshot. Again, it's kind of similar to just seeing a Polaroid versus an album. Interesting. Story 3. Not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there, and people can get usernames and passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computer a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer, and I had to close out inactive library cards or ones that hadn't paid dues. Basically, this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktops and cleaning them out. This old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he passed away a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me, and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life, encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy. Missy, from what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want love letters. As it were, the wife had passed away, and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad because these were letters to his long-past wife. She had perished in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. That's something beautiful. And again, this is just amazing that something has reached long past when they were gone. Do you think there's anything that you have written or made or said that will go past long after you've gone away? Let me know in the comments. Story 4. When I was 18, I took my older brother's computer after he was taken in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved, and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house, we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of self-unaliving notes. But he never left a completed note, and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to go, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident? I couldn't understand how this happy, great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue. An internet history, an AOL Instant Messenger log, this was back in the day, a photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange, nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to unalive himself, but I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Too long didn't read, passed away brother's computer, possible self-unaliving, wish that I hadn't found out that he had erased his computer history. After reading all these stories, this seems worse than actually finding something. Story 5. Oh, good. This story. So, my uncle took buttloads of pictures. Just all the dang time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he passed away. Turns out we could have lost every single picture ever taken of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked corn. So much corn. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely corn. Now, I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 gigabytes of named timestamp videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men? We have the USB for that right this way. Too long didn't read? Priceless memories, creepy corn. Dude, I'm sure someone would buy that collection. Story 6. My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young, and it was unexpected. I helped her boss get into his computer at work, and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investment, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had, visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have been much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There were a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down and then it was over. And so now, I sit at his desk, on his computer, using his mouse and his keyboard, and do his job. I like to think he's out there, somewhere, watching over me, and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so, at any rate. This one almost sounds like it could be a Twilight Zone episode. Maybe at the end it would have been revealed that, oh, we had the same likes and everything because it was me the whole time. But it actually turns out to be a pretty sweet story, and kind of a melancholy one at that.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.